Great. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this webinar. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I am Nectaria. I am the head of education at Pink Elephant EMEA, and it is a pleasure to be hosting today's session for you. We're here to talk about something that many organizations are actively navigating right now, how to move beyond traditional supplier management and start thinking more holistically about their end-to-end service integration. This shift can make an important difference in how services are delivered and experienced across the businesses. But before we get started, just a quick note about the Q&A section that is available to you at the top of your screen. Please feel free to add your questions at any point during the session, and we will make sure to address those at the end. Now, to guide us through today's topic, I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Richard de Boer. Richard brings a wealth of experience in service management and SIAM, and he has worked with organizations around the globe to help them make sense of complex and multi-supplier environments. Richard, it's great to have you with us today, and thank you very much for joining us. Again, thanks everyone for attending and being here with us today, and I hope that you will find this session valuable and useful for your own organizations. Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nectaria. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, of course, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to talk indeed about service integration and management. Or shorter, we call it SIAM. For some of you, this might be the first time that you hear about SIAM, and also that's exactly why this session is here. And to give you a big picture about what SIAM is, since we know, as Nectaria just told us, SIAM becomes really critical as organizations are increasingly to work with multiple suppliers, but also with multiple cloud services, SaaS solutions. The presentation that I'm delivering here is the same one that also been delivered during the Pink 26 conference in Las Vegas last February, where a lot of people from the US were also by this session first introduced to the concept of SIAM. All right, so what's going to be on the agenda? Why supplier management is not enough? Perhaps we should say not enough anymore. What is SIAM? Also, what are some global trends and drivers? The community around SIAM is creating some surveys on a regular base. And we got some data from those surveys. How SIAM does work, how also to transition to SIAM. Some lessons learned from the field, some takeaways, and then also we have a special guest from Axin, Carolina, who's going to tell us something more about the certification scheme, which is behind the SIAM framework, if you also would like to get certified on this topic. And like Nectaria said, we will be able to answer some questions at the end of the session. Please do share them with us. And also we will use some polls just to, interact with you and to get a better understanding about what you feel about certain topics. All right, first bit, why supply management on itself is not enough or not enough anymore. It doesn't say that supply management has no value, so be aware of it, but perhaps it's not enough. And because traditional supply management really focused on individual contracts, on individual SLAs, and this is where the problem perhaps starts. Because managing individual suppliers, managing individual contracts, is not managing the complete end-to-end service. And what we see is that each supplier optimize its own performance, often in isolation, and the results is silos, fragmented responsibilities, finger pointing when incidents cross service provider boundaries, and that's not really helpful. That's not helping the organization. So from a business perspective, the service may be failing, even though every single supplier claims to be green with their KPIs. So the customer is experiencing a service and not the supplier, and this is quite often what the challenge is. So how are currently a lot of organizations managing their suppliers? Well, each supplier quite often has his own contact person in the organization. And that contact person could be centralized person, but quite often it's just the first one that's got in contact with that supplier, or it's the main stakeholder of that supplier. And suddenly you also become a supplier manager, or you're managing a supplier. And quite often there's also a contract in place, a service level agreement. And that service level agreement dictates, what the suppliers should offer and what they should deliver. And as long as the suppliers are delivering according to that SLA, it seems that everybody is happy. But there are also multiple suppliers, and it also means that multiple people in the organization are responsible for supply management, or are responsible for managing different suppliers. So again, it's fragmented throughout the organization. Next to external suppliers, there can also be internal suppliers, and suppliers that are also of organizations, part of the organizations that also are contributing to the delivery of a service. I must say, rarely an agreement is made over there, is in place, and we call these agreements operational level agreements, OLAs. But like I said, rarely they're in place, and most often it's just based on best effort arrangements. Like I said, there are multiple suppliers working together with the organization. Now imagine this, a major incident happens, and there are 5 suppliers that are involved, but each one is saying, it's not my fault. And meanwhile, the business is down, services are not being delivered, companies are not happy, customers are not happy by what happens. Well, sounds familiar? Well, this is the reality quite often of a multi-supplier environment. Managing suppliers individually does not guarantee end-to-end service performance. This is where we see an end-to-end service. For instance, workplace, collaboration service, document services, and depending on what services you're offering. So many suppliers are involved, but no one is actually managing the end-to-end service. We're focused on individual agreements, SLAs. We're focusing on performances. And again, people are finger pointing and are not actually taking accountability for that end-to-end service. So we need someone who's actually looking after that end-to-end service. We need someone who goes above, that managing of that single supplier. Next to the single supplier, we also see a lot of overlap of activities and work and services that are being provided. Overlaps between, in this case, organization supplier A and supplier B, or also supplier X is doing a great part, what is also being delivered or is part of the SLA that supplier B is offering. So what about those overlaps? Isn't that a waste of time, and isn't that a waste of money and a waste of resources being used? All right, let's take a look for a first poll, a short poll. How complex is the current organization, is your current supplier landscape? So we now see a poll pop up. So how complex is your current supplier landscape? Is it very simple? Are you working with 1 or more suppliers? And it includes internal and external suppliers. Is it moderate, 3 to 5, complex, 6 to 10, very complex? Or perhaps you don't know at this point. So please share your answer. Let's see, the results are getting in. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if you can see the results as well, but I see that none of the people that are currently attending this webinar having a very simple environment where we only have 1 or 2 suppliers. So some of them 3 to 5, a third of you guys 6 to 10, but more than a third, 37%, are in a very complex situation where we have more than 10 suppliers. And I'm lucky enough, there are also some people that really don't have a clue how many suppliers are actually involved in the delivery of the services within your organization. Um, This also makes sure that we do have a very good understanding. And if we're talking about SIAM, SIAM does not have that much value when we're looking at those simple environments where we only have one or two partners or suppliers, because then supplier management works perfectly, of course, because there's not a lot of overlap of work. It's not very complex. There are only two parties we need to manage. And then, well, to be fairly honest, SIAM doesn't bring that much value. Supply management could just work perfectly. But the more suppliers are involved, the more complex the situation is, and the more the need perhaps is for SIAM. So thank you very much for your responses here. So let's dive into what SIAM is. So SIAM stands for Service Integration and Management. And this is a management methodology that is designed for that multi-provider environment. And there's an environment where services are sourced from a number of internal and external service providers. The core idea is that we introduce a service integrator, and this is a single logical entity which is accountable for that end-to-end service delivery. Also make sure that we deliver the right amount of value to our customer. SIAM goes beyond contracts and SLAs. It provides governance, it provides integration, it provides coordination, it provides assurance, and make sure that it's something that is actually adding value to the organization. And SIAM is not a tool, it's not a single process, it actually is an operating model. It's a different way of thinking. SIAM operates at three levels in the ecosystem that I'm going to introduce you shortly. So SIAM works at strategic, at tactical, and operational level. And it's an evolution how to apply the framework of integrated service management across multiple service providers. And that means that we want to make sure that at the end of when we have already implemented SIAM, we will benefit from the choice that we have to work with multiple suppliers, that we can choose the best of breed, but the complexity of working with other suppliers is reduced as we would work together with one partner or one supplier. So SIAM offers an ecosystem, an environment where all parties are familiar with what their role responsibility is in the context of that ecosystem, depending about where you are on strategic level, on integration level, or on delivery level. Making sure that all parties are empowered to deliver the work they should work and are held accountable also for the outcomes they are required to deliver. And it really depends on what those accountabilities is. But the most important thing is that we are focusing on customer value and we're focusing on flow. So how does that ecosystem look like? Well, the ecosystem consists of three layers. The customer organization layer, it sets out the strategy. It also retains key governance. We have the service integrator. It's orchestrating, it is the orchestra. It is making sure that it orchestrates and ensures end-to-end accountability over the service. And of course, we have the different service providers, internally and externally, and delivering parts of the end-to-end service. So let's dive a little bit more into those different roles. The customer organization is the end-to-end client that is making the transition to SIAM as part of its operating model. What really important is that the customer organization is also the organization that is still holding the contracts with all the different partners and suppliers. So we want to make sure that the customer organization is still owns the contracts, it still owns the service, but it's working together with an integrator that is acting like an agent on behalf of the customer organization to manage the end-to-end service performance and to make sure that end-to-end service governance, service management, integration, assurance, and coordination is being performed. Like I said, it is being responsible for the orchestration of all the different service providers that are still responsible for delivering the services that they should, probably as part of the agreement that we have made with them. So we recognize three layers: the customer organization, the service providers, and the service integrator. I also introduced the term SIAM model. The SIAM model consists of the three layers, but also consists of processes, practices, functions, and includes something we call the structural elements. And each organization needs to develop its own SIAM model based on those three layers. And the SIAM model that the organization will adopt will depending on the services that are in the scope, the required outcomes they would like to have, but also other models perhaps that are in place. And so there's not a perfect SIAM model. It's not like copying and pasting a model towards different solutions. You always have to look to the context of your organization to make sure how the SIAM model for your organization should look like. All right. Let's dive into some trends, because we saw a lot of you guys were already saying that you're working with multiple suppliers, and we do see there's a rapid growth in outsourcing and in managing service. There is a shift from cost reduction to more value. We see an increased likelihood of AI. So let's take a look at some global trends, some drivers behind SIAM. So I'm just going to pick out a few of the trends you see here. Explosive market growth. And I already told you we see a growth in outsourcing services. It's projected, the global IT outsourcing market is projected to reach 661.69 billion US dollars in 2025. And it's expected to be nearly doubled by 2034. So we see there's still a growth in outsourcing services, especially, of course, when we're looking at also the cloud solutions and the SaaS solutions that are being offered these days. So we see a large growth of companies working together with more partners and suppliers. We also see that the reason why organizations are outsourcing services is no longer just from the cost perspective, of cost saving perspective, but more they are looking for strategic partnerships. Organizations increasing expect innovation, flexibility, business value from their service providers. It's not just about lowering costs. We see that AI, automation, and data-driven outsourcing takes place more, and we go from outsourcing to more nearshoring or more regional collaboration, and because we see that quite often is a more better cultural fit, and also the time zones are more aligned, which brings some values. And also growing outsourcing demand for specialized or niche services like cybersecurity. Nowadays, of course, also AI skills. And because we have not the internal knowledge or the people that can gain that knowledge, so we are working together with partners. And I see one trend which just shows something else, but I still think it's good to share. And that's the trend of re-insourcing. And some organizations are bringing back some services they actually were outsourcing back within the own organization to reduce complexity. Well, these global trends can also be seen as drivers to rethink how we are dealing with partners and suppliers. And Scopism, which is the community behind SIAM, it has done several surveys, and those surveys also show that SIAM itself is no longer a niche. And we see that worldwide SIAM is actually being practiced, or people have interested in those, in the way that SIAM is introducing. One of the questions that comes from this white paper, and I must say this is based on the 2024 results. In the meantime, there's also a 2025 result, but at the moment we were creating this slide deck, that was not yet available, but the numbers are about the same. One of the questions that was asked is, why do organizations adopt SIAM? And we saw that the top driver here is to improve service quality and also customer satisfaction. We also see there are some elements around reducing complexity, achieving operational efficiency, reducing risk, have better performance from existing services and service vendors, and have more control. So we see those are a few of the responses that we're giving. And it's really important to understand your driver. Why would you consider to move towards SIAM? And because if you don't have a clear understanding about your driver, it's going to be very hard to also implement new ways of working. So again, perhaps it's time for another poll because I'm really curious about what your drivers are. So let's bring out another poll. What's your main driver for change your sourcing strategy? Is it because of cost reduction? Is it because the need of innovation or the complexity which is increasing? Do we demand more flexibility and speed? Or is it because we want to reduce the risk, or we want to be more compliant, or we want to be more in control? So what's the main reason? Main reason. So you only can choose one, but what's the main reason for your organization to to think about implementing SIAM in your organization? All right, I see a few people have already responded. So good thing to see is that everything has been mentioned, so it really depends on the type of organization you're in, of course. But we see that 2/3 of the people choose increasing complexity. So we see there is an increasing complexity, which well forces us to rethink the way and that we are well dealing with our sourcing strategy, and perhaps SIAM could be indeed a good solution. Thank you very much, guys, for your response. I really appreciate it. All right. So how does it work? And again, we are here on high level, so there's normally we talk 2 days about these things. So we just try to narrow it down into some highlights. How does SIAM work on high level? So we have strategic level, delivery, and integration level. So from a strategic level, we see that the customer organization, it's the organization that is starting with SIAM. They want to be having SIAM as part of their operating model. And a customer organization will still remain responsible for strategic activities, like working together with their customers, like creating a service portfolio, making sure that enterprise architecture is in place and that strategic decisions are being made. So the strategy is a responsibility, is the accountability for the customer organization. When we're looking at the delivery layer, this is where the service providers are just providing the work they normally do as well. Developing applications, support network services, perform hosting activities, the normal work they're doing in order to deliver that service. And then new is the integrator layer. The integrator layer, this is where the service integrator comes in place. And like I already said, the service integrator is representing the customer, is acting like an agent for the customer. And he's responsible for supplier management, the coordination of the suppliers, but also responsible for end-to-end reporting and making sure that the customer has a good, clear understanding about the actual value that all the suppliers are delivering. And of course, continue improvement. So outside a SIAM model, quite often it's the customer that has a direct relationship with the service providers. But within the SIAM ecosystem, we're dealing different with that situation. So the customer organization needs to understand that its role is to support and empower the service integrator. That doesn't mean that he can relinquish all responsibilities. No, the retained capabilities are the capabilities that we expect that the customer organization will still be responsible for and accountable for. So that means having a strong relationship with the service integrator, provide the service integrator with direction, provide them also with autonomy without creating a dictatorship, making sure that it still owns the contracts with the service provider, and when there is an external service integrator, the integrator, and making sure that the integrator is managing the delivery against that contract. Retained capabilities are making sure that the integrator can carry out its role without undermining it, and also make sure that the customer organization is still responsible for the strategic activities like business relationship management, contract management, strategy management, what we expect the customer to be doing. The service integrator is acting like an agent of the customer, doing the right thing for the customer without, again, undermining its own organizational goals and objectives. And it's representing also the service provider and the end-to-end service towards the customer organization. Hence why we talked about end-to-end service reporting. And the service providers, well, it also has some impact working in SIAM for them, because we expect them to work collaboratively together with other service providers and also together with the service integrator to making sure that we are delivering the best services ever. Well, there are multiple ways to organize this ecosystem. So there are different structures that could be chosen. One of them is that you work with an external service integrator. This is a service integrator that is yet not yet delivering any services to the customer. It's a new organization and it's only accountable for the integration part of it. So you're solely the service integrator managing the different service providers internally and externally. Then we move to the internal service integrator. That's the second one you see. So we move to the right. The internal service integrator means that the service integration activities are being carried out by the customer organization itself, but it is a loose department. It's a separate department from the retained capabilities. Be very clear about it, that it's not mixed up. We have a separate department, integration department, that takes on that role. Then we move to the bottom and we start off with the right bottom, where it says a lead supplier. A lead supplier means there is already a current provider in the organization that is also becomes the service integrator. So the customer organization already has a relationship with a current supplier, and they think that current supplier is good enough to also perform service integration activities. So we have a lead supplier situation, and then we move to the left, so the left bottom, and we see a hybrid service integrator. And this is a situation where the internal organization and an external service provider are actually working together in a new organization to deliver that service integrator capability. It's not like you're responsible for these providers, I'm going to be responsible for those providers, and this is hybrid. Now, hybrid actually means working together, forming a new entity. What you will choose really depends on a lot of factors. Think about what are the business requirements, but also what are the internal capabilities, including maturity, resources, the skills we have. And that really determines if you want to do things internally or you need to outsource the service integrator role. Also, the complexity of the services that the customer is delivering, the current structure, the size of the organization, perhaps also rules and regulations that could influence it, the risk appetite, also the appetite for external sourcing, the time skills that are there. So there are a lot of numbers that could influence you choosing which structure fits your organization the best. We've done some research again, and this comes again from the SIAM survey. And the SIAM survey showed, now, what type of service integrator structure do you plan to adopt? So be aware of fact, this was in 2024, organization that responded that were thinking about implementing SIAM in their organization. And more than half of them were like, okay, the current customer organization should also be getting responsible for service integration. So we have an internal service integrator, 52%. 7% was working with a lead supplier. So that means a current partner supplier is also providing the integrator activities. 4% choose for an external service integrator. So that's an organization we do not have yet a relationship with. And hybrid was chosen in 37%. And that means an external organization and the internal organization are working together. Just a little bit background information. Quite often that hybrid situation is well, quite often a temporary solution. And that means that either we're going to start off with a hybrid situation, and then when the external organization has a good understanding about the complexity of the customer organization, the services they're providing, they can then do it themselves. So we move from hybrid to external, or the internal organization gains a lot of knowledge coming from the external organization and want to do it themselves. So hybrid will lead to an internal service integrator. So quite often we see it moves to either external or internal, and sometimes it's keeping the same. But my experience so far is that hybrid is quite often temporary. All right. We were already talking a little bit about the SIAM model. So here's a list of things that you can find in the SIAM model. So the SIAM model is not just thinking about a structure, but is much more. And as I told you early, the SIAM model contains the 3 layers, but also introduces the service model, the processes in place, the interactions that the providers may have, the governance model to clearly indicate who's going to be accountable for what, and what are the differences between governance and management, and what is management. Detailed roles and responsibilities explaining who's accountable. Then we have a performance management and reporting framework that enables us to actually understand end-to-end performance, but also understand the individual contribution of each of the suppliers. Then we have a collaboration model in place that makes sure that organizations can actually work together pretty well. We have a tooling strategy in place to make sure that we can communicate amongst each other pretty well. And there's an ongoing improvement framework. So these are all elements you can find in the SIAM model. So it's not just only a framework or it's just a process, and there's much more behind it. One of the things is a collaboration model. And a collaboration model means that we're looking at ways to make sure that collaboration can be done really effectively and efficient. And that's also related to the structural elements that SIAM is offering. And I really think that you should be really seeing the value of those structural elements. The structural elements, I think, are the glue that make SIAM possible in ecosystems. So there are 3 examples of structural elements. We have the boards, the process forums, and the working groups. So these are 3 types, and each of them can be explained separately very shortly. The boards are just the formal decision-making bodies, and they're accountable for decisions that can be made within a SIAM ecosystem. They are meeting on a regular basis and they make decisions, for instance, about the services that are being provided or the way that we collaborate with each other. So these are the decision-making bodies. A good example for a board on operational level is the Integrated Change Advisory Board, and making sure that we understand the impact of changes towards the whole end-to-end service and make sure that the right decisions are being made. 2 other boards I think are very valuable are the process forums and the working groups. And the process forums are aligned to a specific process or processes or practices. So we want to make sure that, for instance, for incident management, we actually work together. If you have multiple organizations, multiple providers that are working together to resolve incidents, we need to make sure that we also have a common way of working, so that the processes are adapted to each other. Making sure that's possible, it comes through the process forums. And we see responsibilities from each of the organizations explaining their process and understanding the end-to-end process and how they can contribute to that end-to-end process. And then working groups, there are ad hoc groups that are only there to deal with certain situations. That could either be a project, an innovation, that could be dealing with an incident or dealing with a change or with a problem. So it's just an ad hoc form group that have representatives from different organizations depending on what's needed. So for a problem resolving, we probably need from service provider A representative, from B, and from the integrator, and from the internal organization. And together, those 4 people work together to resolve that problem. So working groups are ad hoc and are temporarily based. All right, there are some steps. There is a roadmap that I would like to introduce to you also about SIAM. But before we go into that, quickly have a poll set out for you. If you are interested in SIAM, is your organization planning to move towards SIAM model within the next 2 years or not? So let's have a poll here. So is your organization planning to move towards SIAM model in the next 2 years? And it could be yes, we're already working on it, or we're planning for it, or we're considering it. We're not sure, we haven't planned it yet, or this is the first time I get into contact with SIAM, so it's not yet a topic that has been discussed. So I see some people very quickly with a response. I like it. I see quite a few already are in progress, so they're already working based on SIAM, or trying to, sorry, not working, but you're already implementing SIAM in your organization. I see 1/5 are considering it, 1/4 are not planning it yet, and 1/3 is just not sure yet. This is the first time you're getting in touch with SIAM, and there's not yet a plan. If you're considering it, or you want to start planning it, but also if you're already in progress, it's good to follow a certain sequence of activities. And the roadmap that SIAM is offering, I think, has a lot of value because it really helps organizations to think about how to implement it. So the roadmap is introducing 4 stages, and that brings us from the starting point till actually delivery of SIAM. So let's go a little bit into more detail about those 4 stages, 4 iterative stages. We have the discovery and strategy stage. That's a starting point. This is happening within the customer organization. They need to think about why we're doing this. So what are our strategic objectives? How also should governance look like? What will be our responsibility? What will be the accountability of the integrator? We need to understand also the current capabilities, the current maturity of the organization. That means assessing the internal organization, but also assessing the external organization and understanding the marketplace. And we start developing an outline model, an outline strategy, and an outline business case. Then if we got an agreement on a business case, we can go into the plan and build stage where we actually are developing a detailed SIAM model. We're making sure that we have full approval of the business case, and we appoint the service integrator, the service providers, and we make a plan for implementation. And that's also then the next stage where we are transitioning from the way we work now towards the new way of working as SIAM. And implementation could take a while because not all the service providers are directly ready, to be part of that ecosystem. So it could be that we use a lot of iterations during the implementation stage, and then we get into run and improve. And this is actually where SIAM becomes business as usual. And we are operating the structure elements. We're doing the things as we should do, and we are constantly looking at improvements. Sorry, I'm going to go through it very quickly also since the time is moving by very fast. And luckily, a lot of organizations already recognize that doing this is not something you can just do in 2 weeks. I mean, SIAM is not just a project, a 2-week project. Is actually a transformation. It should be a program where multiple elements need to be done from. I think each of the roadmap is a program on a project on itself almost. So luckily, a lot of organizations do recognize that it's not being done in weeks, but it should take perhaps 1 to 2 years or even perhaps longer. All right, I want to share some lessons I learned from the field, things that I've done. Now, like Nectaria said, we have helped a lot of organizations implementing SIAM in their organization. And we helped organizations to work with external service providers, but also internal service providers, hybrid situations. I've been working with customer organization, but also with potential service integrators. So we've seen situation coming from, we've seen projects from multiple angles. And there are some lessons learned that I would like to share with you. I think really important is that sometimes we think that the SIAM success depends on the perfect model or the perfect tool set. But after so many implementations, we've learned it's not the model, it's the mindset which is important. And when clarity disappears, chaos begins. When collaboration turns into contract management, and the flow will stop. When trust is not there, again, there's no flow of work, and that's something we should be willing for. So there are 5 things that have successful companies that do have successful companies in common. They're very clear about who does what. So the SIAM strategy, clear governance, service level agreements, and underpinning contracts that are in place, end-to-end reporting, we provide clarity. Also, collaboration needs to be in place. And the companies that were very successful do collaborate across boundaries. So we have the structure elements in place, there are collaboration agreements, and there are willing parties that actually want to make SIAM for a success. They also feel they're actually contributing to something bigger. There should be trust, and they build trust by being consistent, being impartial. So we have an impartial service integrator. There's clear governance. There's also a clear reporting framework, and they keep accountability where it belongs. Clear governance. The customer organization again is ultimate accountable for the success. Plus, the last thing, we're not focused on outputs, we're focused on outcomes, not on ticking the process boxes. Because this is when, altogether, when you do this, and this is when SIAM stops being a framework and actually starts being a culture. Within that culture, we see there is focus on flow, focus on end-to-end value, but also make sure, and there's also focus on resilience. And resilience, where continuous feedback is there. It's safe to feel environment which is being developed, and we can respond very quickly to changes. So some steps for SIAM success. Make sure you assess your fit and readiness. Follow the roadmap. They have value. Make sure you have a strong business case which also indicates the reason why you're doing it. So you understand the why of your organization, your driver. Make sure you have a clear definition of what's in scope of SIAM, the services. Manage organizational change because it's much more about, it's also about people doing things differently. Have a tooling and data strategy in place. Make sure you measure and monitor performance end to end and learn continually, improve continually. I needed to speed up a little bit because I thought time was passing by, but I would like to introduce also Carolina. Hi, Carolina. You're
Hi,
from
Richard.
Axin. You're a product manager from Axin, and Axin just introduced a new SIAM certificate scheme, and we're really curious about what you can share with us.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for your invitation. Of course, maybe we can start. Well, thank you for joining, to all the people that join. At Exim, we have a SIAM program if you want to get certified after learning about SIAM. We have 2 levels within our SIAM program. One, a foundation level, and then a professional level. So the foundation level prove that the professionals understand basic concepts and principles of managing multiple service providers and integrate seamlessly to provide a single business facting IT organization. Therefore, this certification is aimed at professionals who have an interest in practices of SIAM or want to implement this methodology in their organization. As you can see, this certification will prove the knowledge, understanding, the learning of core principles and terminology, the why and the what, identify business challenges and risk. And on the other hand, we have the XING SIAM professional certification, which confirms, validates that the professional can perform activities in the 4 stages that Richard mentioned just some minutes ago of SIAM roadmap. While managing multiple service providers and also integrating them into their organization. This certification is aimed at professionals who have an interest in practices of SIAM and want to apply, implement, or improve this methodology in their organization. So this is a very summary of our certification, how this certification is built. We have the foundation with 40 multiple choice questions, as well as the professional has 40 multiple choice questions. The difference is in the exam duration. Why? Because the professional wants to test advanced skills. So this exam is based in a case study. So, and also training, it's necessary for taking this certification for the professional, because during this training, the candidate or the professional will learn about this, implementing these 4 stages based on a case study, so in a real world scenario. The exam, we have foundation in English, German, and Japanese, and for now we have professional in English. Next, please. Just very quick, what we test in this exam for the SIAM Foundation certification. We test first introduction of SIAM, fundamentals, layers, structures, then the SIAM roadmap, how to implement key stages, roles, practices, and processes that support SIAM, such as continual service improvement, supplier management, and change and release management. And lastly, some challenges and risk in SIAM. And lastly, we have the professional. As I mentioned, we test the 4 stages in SIAM: discovery and strategy, plan and build, and implement, run and improve. Basically, the idea, this exam is based in Bloom level 3 and 4. So it tests how to apply this SIAM methodology within these 4 stages. So that's it. Thank
What
you
I
so
like,
much.
Nita, about this scheme is that the foundation is actually showing you indeed what you said, the how and the what, the why and the what. What is it? But actually, the practitioner is also based on the professional body of knowledge. And
Exactly.
it's actually a different book which actually explains you all those stages and it's helping you actually to implement SIAM. So for people that want to implement SIAM, I think the professional module actually makes sense and can be very helpful. That I think it's very helpful certification.
Yeah, exactly. As you mentioned, escapism have 2 different body of knowledge. One for the foundation, a foundational one, and a professional or advanced one. So we based our exams, the foundation exam, in the body of knowledge of the foundation body of knowledge, and then the professional in the, of course, professional body of knowledge that escapism has developed.
Very good. Thank you very much, Carolina, for explaining us how how it looks like the accent scheme. All right, there is a possibility to ask some questions if you would like.
Exactly. And thank you very much, Richard, for this insightful session, and also Carolina for sharing the information about the certification as well. Before we open things up, I'd like to start the conversation asking some questions myself, I think. So hopefully more people can add their own questions into the Q&A session, and then we can take it from there. So just to start, I did want to ask what would be the most common mistakes that you have observed, Richard, that organizations make nowadays?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good question. I think what I said earlier on, SIAM is not just a process. It's actually a different way of thinking and acting. So I think treating SIAM as a process implementation instead of, actually an organizational change that is focusing on end-to-end value, it is the mistake that a lot of organizations made. Sometimes I just hear like, let's just implement SIAM as it is. Let's implement supplier management 2.0. But if you look at it, SIAM really changes. It changes all levels. It changes the way that the customer is interacting in the ecosystem, the role it has. It's more eyes on, hands off. It also introduces a new role with the integrator, and that's can be challenging in organizations. But also suppliers suddenly need to collaborate with each other. We expect that perhaps competitors work together in order to get great results. So it has an impact on a lot of things, and it should be treated as an organizational change than just something that you're implementing. So yeah, that's one of the mistakes that I've seen a lot of times happening. People that started off or went too quickly jumping into conclusions and jumping into the implementation stage.
Right. That makes sense. And I think just following up on that question, I think there are a lot of people also kind of confusing the fact that, for example, SIAM is like a different model that is competing directly with ITIL. So on that particular aspect, which is something that is indeed kind of like a perception that we hear a lot nowadays, how would you explain that, for example, SIAM and ITIL can actually work in parallel and be quite effective also for internal processes within businesses?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I heard this as well a couple of times indeed. Hey, we're already working based on ITIL, so should we move that away and then introduce SIAM?
Yeah.
Now, they're not competing models, and they actually are complementary towards each other. And we quite often see that ITIL is offering the operating model, it's offering the practices, I should say. And SIAM is building on those practices that already exist, but now adds integration, it's adding governance, it's adding accountability across multiple suppliers. So both worlds are not competing, they're actually complementary to each other. And the same accounts for SIAM also integrates perfectly within a agile environment or within a DevOps environment.
Right. And if you would like to, let's say, from organizations to start their SIAM journey, what would you think that it would be the first step for them?
Well, so what also Carolina showed to us, the different stages that we have within a professional body of knowledge. I think that's the really important. Start with a good discovery. That means making sure that you assess your fit and readiness of the organization. Have a clear understanding about the scope, and make sure that the business case, including the reason why we're doing it, so including the driver is known. And because without that foundation, we see that transitions, well, can be more difficult and can be very challenging. So start with a discovery and look also at the current capabilities, assess and understand the fitness of your organization.
Make sure you understand where you are, and then you just start from there, of course. Just take a pause. Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, there are no other questions from my side. I guess only like if I would ask a conclusion from your side, Richard, just about a key message that you would like the attendance of this session to just get as a key takeaway, what would that be?
Yeah, if you're going to put it into a key sentence, I would say, SIAM is about shifting from managing individual suppliers to managing an end-to-end service, where we have an accountable integrator that is actually focusing on delivering business value for the customer organization.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else would have any questions. I don't see anything in the Q&A section, but do please feel free to add any questions that we might not have covered already. Otherwise, I think we have completed this webinar right on time as well. So that's a good thumbs up for everyone. Okay, excellent. I think we're not getting any other questions.
Well,
I do want to say that there will be a recording available upon the completion of this webinar. So if anyone from the attendants would like to get access to the recording or access to the PowerPoint presentation that Richard has delivered for you today, please do reach out at our info@pinkelephant.co.uk so we can make sure that we can share those with you. And I'd like to take the time to thank everyone for attending today's session. I hope that you have found the information shared from Richard and from Carolina as well quite useful. And you're hopefully ready to implement, or if not to implement, at least you have already taken the first step towards SIAM right now. So once again, thank you very much all for attending. And of course, Richard and Carolina for your contribution as well.
thank you very much, Nectaria.
Excellent.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Thank you. Have a lovely morning, everyone.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.